Good evening, everyone. I think we're going to get started. My name is Julia Chin, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to UC Santa Barbara's External Vice President of Statewide Affairs and UC Student Association's Double the Pell panel. Thank you for joining this essential panel representing a collaborative effort between the UCSB External Vice President of Statewide Affairs Office, Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships, Office of Government Relations, and Student Affairs. A huge thank you to all of our panelists for joining this evening, especially your student representatives. We could not have done this without you. Tonight's event will be moderated by External Vice President of Statewide Affairs President Aaliyah Skye and feature a raffle for UCSB bookstore gift cards at the conclusion of the event. Tonight's event will also be live streamed on UCSB Student Affairs YouTube for viewing afterward. I would now like to welcome Assistant Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Services, Mike Miller, to open our event with some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. As Julia mentioned, my name is Mike Miller. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Services at UCSB. I've been on campus now for just about 20 years, and my background is really in access and affordability. So this is a conversation that I'm thrilled to be having with all of you. And I definitely want to say a quick thank you to UCSA, the Office of the EVPSA, Fund the UC, and all of our student leaders, my colleagues, and all of you that are in attendance. I also just want to take a second to really remind you all about the power of the student voice. In 2018, UCSB students rallied and really made a huge impact at the state level when they advocated for additional summer support. And thanks to the advocacy of our student leaders, they were able to help generate about $10 million for UC and CSU students to attend summer and make summer more affordable. So I think it's a great reminder for us to really be vocal and advocate for higher education affordability and increasing financial aid. Doubling the Pell would really have a huge impact, and in a moment you'll hear from our Director of Financial Aid, who will outline that in more detail. But one of the things, as I was actually looking through Saúl's slides, and one of the things that really stood out to me was the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant has not kept pace with inflation. 40 years ago, the Pell Grant itself covered about 75% of the cost of a 4-year degree, or 4 years at a 4-year institution, and now that has dropped to about 28%. So obviously, the purchasing power of the Pell Grant has drastically decreased, and is something that it would be great to see. It'd be great to see reversed, because there are definitely a lot of high need students, especially at the University of California, where we really take pride in serving low income first generation college students. And hopefully this is just the beginning of several different conversations. I know that Saúl and I are also very interested in trying to figure out how to expand eligibility to populations like our undocumented students, to really level the playing field and make sure that if a student is able to get into the University of California, that they're able to afford to complete their degree and thrive while they're on our campus. So with that, I again just want to say thank you again, and I'll turn it over to Saúl, who is the Director of Financial Aid on our campus. If you don't know him, you absolutely should. He's a great student advocate and does really innovative work to really help our students at UCSB be able to afford their time on campus. So with that, I'll turn it over to Saúl.
Thank you, AVC Miller. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. So bear with me for 1 second. All right. Well, once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Saúl Quiroz. I'm the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarship. Proudly serve as the Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships here at UCSB. And as part of our discussion today, I'll be going over a little bit of information specific to the Pell Grant program, but more in detail in terms of our Pell Grant recipient profile here at UC Santa Barbara. So the federal Pell Grant program is really the foundation of our federal financial aid programs. It's been around for around 50 years with the explicit goal of increasing access to college for low and moderate income students. The Pell Grant is it's a federal grant and it's awarded to undergraduates with exceptional financial need. To be considered, students need to submit a FAFSA application, the federal application for student aid, and meet the various eligibility requirements. It is specific to undergraduate students, so unfortunately, if you've already received your bachelor's degree or are pursuing a master's or a graduate professional degree, you are ineligible. So it's primarily or specifically for undergraduate students. For the current aid year, the maximum Pell Grant award is $6,345. There is a lifetime Pell Grant eligibility, so students can't receive more than 6 years worth of Pell Grant throughout their time as undergraduates. And every year, there's over 7 million students who receive the federal Pell Grant across the country, and it's primarily at public institutions like ours. But in taking a closer look at UCSB Pell Grant recipients, though, you can see that we're averaging approximately 8,100 students who qualify for the Pell Grant over the last 5 years. Our population represents roughly a third of undergraduate students, roughly a third receive the federal Pell Grant. But if potentially eligible students are US citizens or residents, it's closer to 40%. Incoming freshmen, also roughly a third of our incoming freshmen qualify for the Pell Grant, and it's slightly higher for incoming transfer students, it's closer to 40%, which is not entirely surprising given that our transfer students tend to be more non-traditional student parents, student veterans, et cetera. Let's see. So looking a little bit closer at our student population, though, like I said, for the current year, roughly half of our students this year who are Pell Grant eligible have an expected family contribution of $0, which means that they qualify for the maximum Pell Grant, the $6,345 grant. The average family income for our Pell Grant students is $31,866. Nationally, though, that number, more than half, or 53% of Pell Grant recipients have a family income below $20,000, 70% have a family income below $30,000, and 95% have an income of below $60,000. So the federal Pell Grant program is definitely going to the appropriate students, the most needy students, as is demonstrated by these figures here. In terms of a breakdown of our dependency status for students, 87%, the overwhelming majority of our Pell Grant recipients are dependent students, and 13% are independent students. That does differ slightly from the national averages, where over 50% of Pell Grant recipients are independent students, and more than half of those independent students have dependents of their own. Let's see. So today, the Pell Grant covers, as AVC Miller was mentioning, covers just 29% of the average cost of tuition, fees, and room and board at public four-year institutions. It's at its lowest level in more than 40 years and far below the 79% that it covered when the program was fully implemented back in 1975. So we've definitely seen this downward trend in terms of how much the Pell Grant is covering for the cost of attending a four-year institution. But when we look at, or if we look at tuition and fees alone, it's really evident that the increases to Pell Grant have not kept up with the rising costs of tuition. In the past 20 years, the average tuition and fees at public four-year institutions, the most affordable institutions conferring bachelor's degrees, the fees have more than doubled, whereas the maximum Pell Grant has only grown by 29%. So it's definitely clear, that we're in need of additional funding of, and doubling the Pell Grant will help us close this gap. So in order to address the disparity in funding, students are then required to turn to other means, to alternatives to help fund their educational costs. And so students are turning to either employment, to borrowing, to help address that funding gap. As you can see, a larger percentage of Pell Grant recipients work in comparison to their non-Pell Grant peers, and they're also working a little bit more, have a few more hours that they work per week. Research shows that if students are working more than 15 to 20 hours a week, the likelihood of potentially dropping out increases. So by increasing the Pell Grant, hopefully this will help aid or help some students work less so that they can focus on completing that degree, their degree. Next, let's explore some of the borrowing trends for our Pell Grant recipients. Pell students assume significantly more debt to attend the same institution as their higher income students. As you can see here, Pell recipients are more than twice as likely to borrow compared to their non-Pell peers. Although borrowing levels are fairly consistent, the average debt is pretty consistent among both groups. More than 80% of Pell Grant recipients who graduate from four-year colleges currently have student loan debt. And Pell Grant graduates of four-year colleges who took student loans out finished with an average of over $30,000 in debt, which is approximately $4,700 more than their non-Pell peers. So, our students are borrowing at a higher rate, and they're also borrowing a little bit more. So while federal student loans can be a critical access tool and pay off for most borrowers over time, relying heavily on loans disproportionately saddles low-income students with debt that they may not be able to repay down the road, potentially leading to longer-term issues like the inability to buy a home, adverse credit, perhaps holding off on starting your family. That's some of the impact that having a large loan debt can create. But nationally, we are doing a lot better. Again, nationally, it's over $30,000 is the average that students incur in student debt for students who are graduating from four-year institutions. You can also see that the trend is going down for us on our campus for both Pell recipients and non-Pell recipients. And I think this is really attributed to some of the efforts on campus, centered around basic needs and making sure that students have these additional resources to help cover their entire cost of attendance. Now let's move on to discuss the retention and graduation rates at UCSB for Pell recipients as it compares to their non-Pell Grant recipients. As you can see, retention rates for both groups is over 90%. However, non-Pell recipients have a slightly higher retention rate during that first year that they attend our institution. When it comes to graduation rates, particularly four-year graduation rates, the difference is a little bit more pronounced. Roughly 2/3 of Pell Grant recipients graduate within 4 years, whereas non-Pell Grant recipients or 3/4 of non-Pell Grant recipients are graduating within that same time frame. The gap does shorten slightly when looking at 5- and 6-year graduation rates. However, the longer a student is enrolled, the more expensive it is, and the likelihood of needing to borrow certainly increases. So we definitely want to make sure that students are graduating timely and go on and do great things. It is important to note, though, that UCSB does a great job of retaining and graduating Pell Grant recipients. In fact, the most recent New York Times ranking for top colleges doing the most for the American dream, UCSB ranked #2 in their College Access Index, which is really measured based on these metrics here that are on the screen. So we definitely do a great job of retaining and graduating our students, but always striving to do better. So a little bit of the impact that increasing grant dollars can have on graduation and retention. $1,000 increase in grant aid improves college retention by 1 to 5 percentage points, research shows. And Pell Grant bolsters school completion as well. A 2014 study by the University of Massachusetts researcher found that for every $1,000 increase in Pell Grant, lower income students' chances of getting a bachelor's degree within 6 years rose by 3%. And that's not an insignificant number. For our population, that could be several hundred students that are ultimately graduating. Pell Grant also reduces the time that someone takes to earn a degree by increasing the number of credits taken without affecting his or her grades, especially for our needier students. So, the more resources you have, the more time you have to focus on that important work that you need to complete to earn your degree. Let's see. So in summary, really, the Pell Grant helps narrow the post-secondary achievement gap between low and moderate income students and those of greater means. Pell Grant plays a critical role in expanding post-secondary opportunity for non-traditional and historically underserved populations, including older students and students who are parents or student veterans, like I mentioned earlier. They help boost college enrollment, reduce dropout rates, and improve student outcomes. By enabling students to work less and take more courses, they also help accelerate graduation and improve college completion rates. And it also helps reduce the dollar amount that students must borrow to help cover their total cost of attendance. So with that, I'll turn it back to the group here.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Saúl. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Thank you for that background. And so I just wanted to welcome Uche and Gabriel and let them deliver some introductory remarks about what the Pell Grant means to them and their families and just us students. So whoever wants to go first, I guess, is fine.
Can go first. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Uche Hinicho, and I'm a 4th year global studies major here at UCSB. So what the Pell Grant means to my family and me. So I don't think I would actually be a university student without the Pell Grant. I have an older sister. She's a year older than me. So when I was being admitted to UCSB, she was already completing her first year at UCLA. And so having 2 kids in college was a huge financial strain on my parents, or at least it would have been without financial aid. And I remember in my last year of high school, I was so worried about whether or not I'd be able to attend university because of the cost. And so it's things like the Pell Grant that made that possible for me. And also now that I'm here, making it possible to be a student and not worrying about working all the time. So that's me.
Hey guys, my name's Gabriel and I'm a 5th year electrical engineering major. I'm from South Central LA. Something really fast, I guess interesting about me is like playing guitar in my free time, which is not that much time. For me, I want to emphasize that the Pell Grant, it gives me peace of mind with the financial buffer it kind of gives me. Funding for college is more than just paying for like room and board. There are a lot of hidden fees that could really like add up quickly. And as a first generation student in a STEM major, that little bit of money allowed me to focus on catching up in math and physics my first year. Trust me, I really needed help in math and physics my first year. So coming here and not having to worry about all these hidden costs and stuff kind of it helped me be successful. And if it wasn't for that, I would have probably gotten knocked out of college like in a week if I had to work at the same time as doing all of this. And beyond how it affects me, my parents don't really have to worry about me not having money, especially considering that times are tough right now. A lot of people are getting laid off, and a lot of students have insurance from where their parents work. And when people are getting laid off, they lose that insurance. And doubling this Pell Grant would help cover the UC insurance costs. A lot of people might struggle with if they have to pay those $1,200 for insurance for a given quarter. And yeah, that's the intro.
Thank you guys so much, or thank you all so much for that. And I just want to introduce now Monica Solorzano. I hope I said that right. I'm sorry. Who's the Assistant Director in the UCSB Office of Government Relations.
Yeah, thank you, Aaliyah, and thank you everyone who tuned in for this important event. As Aaliyah mentioned, my name is Monica Solorzano, and I'm Assistant Director in the Office of Government Relations on campus. And I just wanted to talk a little bit briefly about our role in this campaign and in helping you to get your voices heard with the appropriate legislators. So really what my office does, my director and I, my director Kirsten Deschler and myself, is we facilitate communication between folks like you, students, faculty, staff, and our elected representatives in Sacramento and DC. So we work really closely with the Office of the President and with the UC Washington Center out in DC on different advocacy opportunities throughout the year. And so most relevant for this conversation is there are going to be several different virtual hearings, virtual meetings, virtual advocacy events that are going to be rolled out this spring and later on in the year that we really are looking forward to partnering with students on. And that's why I'm so happy that Julie invited me to speak at this, because there's a lot that we can do to help you get your stories heard by the right people. Folks like our local congressman, Saúl Carbajal, who, as many of you may know, is a gaucho and is also extremely supportive of student financial aid in higher education. So we have a champion there that we really want to, keep the communication open with and make sure he knows about stories like the ones that you guys just shared right now. So in terms of specific Pell-related advocacy, the UC Office of the President is going to be launching a website. I believe it's next week, if it hasn't come out yet. That's going to be a one-stop shop for all of this Pell talking points and facts and figures that Saúl and Mike talked a little bit about. And then throughout the year, there's going to be advocacy campaigns that you can get involved in. One of which is with UCAN. It's the UC Advocacy Network. I hope that you guys are signed up for it, but I will drop the web link in the chat. So that's an opportunity. You just put in your email address, and throughout the year, the UC will be in touch with giving you chances and means to communicate with legislators about issues like Pell, like UC budget, like a lot of different types of important topics. So my office is here to help, and I look forward to being a resource for any of you that are interested in advocacy in Sacramento and DC or with our local officials.
Thank you so much, Monica. And now we're going to get into the moderated Q&A. So we will have Saúl, Uche, and Gabriel all on this panel. And I'm just going to ask that for each question, if I direct it to all the panelists, just 1 to 2 of you answer, since we're running a little late on time. But for the first question, which is directed to Saúl, what does the Pell Grant mean to you in your capacity? And if this is a little bit, if this covers a little bit over what you did in your introductory remarks, you don't have to say too much, but.
Sure. Thanks, Aaliyah. And I should mention that I'm also a proud recipient of the Pell Grant. I received the Pell Grant throughout the 4 years that I was here at UCSB as an undergraduate. So I know I couldn't have made it through those 4 years without this resource. But what the Pell Grant really means to me is that it ensures that our low and that a UC education remains accessible to all students, regardless of your socioeconomic background. If you're admitted to UCSB, the Pell Grant ensures that students that it's accessible, that it's attainable. It also means that we have the additional resources that we do have, like our institutional grants. Those are also then going to students who are also in need. So really, it just ensures that a UC education remains accessible and affordable for all students who are admitted. That's what it really means to me.
Thank you. And then this is similar, but directed to Uche and Gabriel, whoever wants to answer this. How does the Pell funding affect you as a student at UCSB? And I know this is also similar to introductory remarks, but if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so like what I was saying, it just helps me attend college and helps me focus on what really matters. And like kind of going again, like beyond like what's happening to me. Last year, a friend asked me to let him borrow my skateboard. And he was riding it and he fell on his backpack and broke his computer. And he was screwed for a few weeks. But thanks to the Pell Grant, he had a little bit of money left over and that went into another computer. So it's just kind of a bunch of unexpected things can happen, and this money just it catches you and it won't let you fall down. Yeah.
Uche, if you want to add anything, that's totally fine.
Sure thing. For me, kind of like what Gabriel said, it's allowed me to focus on what really matters. Coming to college isn't just coming in and going out. There's a lot within that as well. You know, making connections, hanging out with friends, being able to invest in myself, my hobbies, and professional development, career development as well. And having the Pell Grant has allowed me to not have to worry about things like my rent or my groceries or buying books for the quarter. So I'm able to direct my attention towards the future instead of worrying so short term. I think that's what's really great about being a Pell recipient.
That makes a lot of sense. This next question is for Saúl. How is the Pell Grant different from other forms of financial aid?
Well, the Pell Grant is entirely based on the expected family contribution, which comes from the FAFSA application. You know, there isn't a merit component similar to the Cal Grant. You know, the Cal Grant looks at a GPA to also qualify, although all of our students are really high achieving, so that wouldn't have been a problem anyways. So it's a federal grant. You can kind of consider it like an unlimited pot of money, in the sense that if a student qualifies based on their FAFSA information, they're going to receive it. You know, we're trying to increase the dollar amount that's available to students, but it is considered an entitlement. It doesn't have to be repaid, you know, the way that loans have to be repaid. Students don't have to work to earn the funding. It's money that's available to students throughout the year to help cover these costs. So those were kind of a couple of the differences. You know, it doesn't have to be repaid. It is entirely based on financial need as determined by the financial aid application. And also it's not really tied to a specific charge like the Cal Grant. You know, the Cal Grant is meant to cover your tuition costs, whereas the Cal Grant can help cover any of your educational related expenses, as have been mentioned, whether it's housing, food, you know, books, supplies, personal expenses, these unexpected expenses that Gabriel mentioned. So that's another kind of difference, that it's not necessarily tied to a specific charge or fee. It's meant to help cover all of your educational related expenses.
Great, thank you so much. And then this is for any or all of the panelists to answer, but why is it important to double the Pell instead of increasing other types of financial aid, which is kind of tied to the question we just asked? But anyone who wants to go for it can.
Well, I don't mean to hog the mic here, but if I can just mention that it does allow us to use our other resources, our institutional resources, to help cover educational costs for students who don't qualify for federal aid, like our undocumented Dream Scholars. So it'll help us better leverage the resources that we do have to also help other needy students that aren't tied to this federal funding.
I would say for me, like the Pell Grant it really only covers my tuition. So I have to take out loans for the rent and anything above that. So based on the way it is now, I'm still having to take out quite a bit of loans as a family student in family housing with no other support, because just the grants just covered the fees and tuition and insurance.
Maybe if I can just add a little bit to that, and thank you for sharing that, Vanessa. You know, for our students who are grant eligible for this current year, for the fall quarter, or for now winter quarter, grant eligible students on average received a little over $19,000 in gift aid and grants and scholarships here at our institution. You know, so it is slightly higher than the tuition and fees that students are charged. Certainly every student situation, their award letter is different, but we are fortunate to live and me to work in a state that really has invested in you know, students and ensuring that the education that we provide here at the UC is accessible. So I did want to kind of share that bit of information that, you know, our students who are grant eligible are receiving, you know, a fair number of grants to help cover, again, not just the tuition and fee, but certainly, you know, circumstances are a little bit different depending on the student.
And I think that kind of speaks to also why we're here and why we're advocating to double the Pell as well, because we understand that even though the financial awards we're given are, it's great to have them, it's also, they're not enough as they are. Which kind of brings me to another question I had for you, Saúl, and I'm sorry that I'm directing so many to you. I'm not picking on you, I promise, but would doubling the Pell increase the average awards for UCSB students, for each student?
Yeah, you know, I think it's fair to say that, you know, I think it would ultimately help reduce the expectation that we have of students to borrow or to work. You know, ultimately, how much the overall grants increase will really be dependent on how much we can get Pell Grant to increase. But again, it would also allow for us to redistribute the other funding that we have to other needy students. So I think it's fair to say that awards would increase, the average grant awards would increase. But more importantly, it means less loans, less work, so that you can, you know, focus on your studies and some of the other important facets of being a student that Uche mentioned earlier.
Thank you. And then this is again for all panelists, anyone who wants to answer, but what do you think the future of the Pell Grant and just financial aid in general would look like to you in an ideal world? Anyone who wants to go ahead.
For me, I think that because, like Saúl said earlier in his presentation, tuition is going up more and more. And in my ideal future, grants would meet that need, and not only to meet the need for students to be able to attend college, but to have fulfilling experiences within their time at university, not having to worry about all of these sorts of things like rent or books or groceries, just being able to be students and have lives outside of work.
A little bit to add on that. I feel like being a full-time student and, like, you know, having a part-time job, I have to sacrifice one of the most vital things, and that is sleep. Strictly because I want two things. I want to, yeah, I need money to keep on going, but also I want good grades. But something has to give in that system of equilibrium, and that is my health. But you know, it's unfortunate that I would have to do that.
Thanks for sharing. And I know, I think that's how a lot, if not most students at UCSB feel, like they're having to balance all of these different things and they can't, there's just not enough room on their plate to put all of them. Just to go back to the questions, and we'll have time for the audience to ask questions very, very soon, so don't worry about that. But all right, actually we could go to audience questions now if we want. So if anyone has any questions, I think you can just ask them in the chat, and then we can pull from there, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. but as we're waiting for questions to come in, I can ask a couple more. And then if you feel like dropping question in the chat, go ahead. But another question I had, if you guys are able to answer it, and this is for any or all of the panelists, is how have you noticed the purchasing power of the Pell Grant decline over your time that you've had it or the time that you've worked with it? So if this is kind of confusing, kind of like that your ability to get something for how much you get in Pell Grant.
Well, I would maybe just, refer to that slide that I had about, the percentage that it's covering in terms of tuition and fees, and then also the other educational costs that come from being a student. I know that ABC Miller was also a Pell Grant recipient. I don't know if there's anything he might want to share about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I've, like I mentioned in my introduction, I've been on campus for about 20 years, and just the cost of education when I got here was probably, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $16,000 or $17,000 for a California resident. And now, it's not just the cost of tuition, but the cost of things like health insurance, obviously rent, and we live in one of the most expensive parts of California, and one of the most expensive parts of the country. And so it has been it has been concerning to see the Pell Grant not keep pace with the overall cost of attendance. And and Saúl can talk a little bit more about this, but when you look at the total number, or the total dollar amount that UCSB awards in I'll say three major grant categories. We have our university grant, we have the Cal Grant program, and then the federal Pell Grant. The Pell Grant's the lowest amount. It provides the lowest dollar figure there, and so we do have a lot. We have a lot of work to do, and I think that it's time. It's time to have these discussions. I'm thrilled that we have we have a new president that's going to be coming into office next week, and so that administration, I think, will hopefully value higher education affordability more than our current administration. So I'm just, again, I'm thrilled that we're having these conversations, because they're it's long overdue, and I think that the Pell Grant, it's time for the Pell Grant program to really increase in the impact that it has on college students across the country.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to bring up too, just in terms of, I mean, you're talking about doubling the Pell Grant in terms of the amount of money, but there's a couple things I was wondering if we're taking into consideration. What is the eligibility amount of money for the Pell Grant? Like the baseline for people that are eligible for Pell Grant. Has there been any talk of increasing that? Because the lines for the poverty line for all kinds of social services is way below what I would think today constitutes poverty or need. And so that would be one thing that I think also needs to be addressed. And then the other thing is, I think the other gentleman had mentioned how you have to sacrifice health or something in order to make it in college anymore. I think as a student that's in the disabled students program, if you have to take a deficit load, you end up having to be here longer. And then the Pell Grant has a 6-year cutoff, which a lot of people with disabilities may be here well beyond 6 years, or at least 7 years, or, I mean, it's not always the case, but I think that sometimes that if you have health issues that you can't sacrifice, you're giving up time and you can't get the Pell Grant for more than 6 years.
Those are really good points. Thank you for bringing them up, and maybe we can maybe I can phrase a question to Saúl and Chancellor Miller, if you guys are able to answer it. But how are there other ways to expand the Pell Grant in terms of who is eligible and how long you can request it for? And also, are there other ways to expand any other of our financial aid programs, for instance, to include undocumented students?
I can start, Aaliyah, and thank you, Vanessa, for your remarks. Right now, the strategy is to, or there are a couple of different strategies when it comes to doubling the Pell Grant. We're talking primarily about doubling the dollar amount that students are potentially eligible, but right now, to qualify, you have to have an expected family contribution of between $0 is what the FAFSA application suggests you can contribute as a family toward your educational costs. But as that expected family contribution goes up, the dollar amount that you're eligible for in Pell goes down, and then there's eventually a cutoff where you're no longer eligible. And that cutoff is right around $5,700. So a student who has an expected family contribution that exceeds that, unfortunately does not qualify for Pell Grant. So another kind of proposed or strategy, I guess, in terms of doubling the Pell Grant is also to then double who qualifies, so having that expected family contribution go up to closer to $12,000 so that those students can also continue to qualify for the Pell Grant. I would love to see both if possible, right? Double the Pell Grant for students who already qualify, but also double the number of students who qualify by extending those expected family contribution bands. So I know that that's also kind of being discussed or proposed. And again, maybe, I don't want to say selfishly, but we want it all, right? We would love to be able to accomplish both. In terms of extending, eligibility to undocumented students, I guess what I would share is that, I'm really proud to live and work in a state like California where we really have invested in ensuring that our Dream Scholars are also funded. So with the passage of the California Dream Act in 2012-13, to ensure that the Dream Scholars are eligible for the Cal Grant, for institutional grants, more recently so that they're eligible for the Dream Loan. So California definitely is leading the charge here and hopefully continues to do so. And as Mike mentioned, with the new administration that's going to start up next week, hopefully there's something there that could be accomplished. I know that President-elect Biden has talked about making sure that our DACA students are also supported. So more than anything, I'm hopeful, but I do believe realistically that it's going to be a fight, and that we need the support, especially from students, to ensure that the conversation keeps going and that we're advocating for all students really to ensure that, again, a UC education remains accessible and affordable for everyone.
Thank you for that. And then also I did want to highlight, I saw a few questions in the chat that kind of relate to when are we going to do this and how can we get involved? So I'm going to direct the first question. Do we have a particular quarter or year that we're aiming to double the Pell Grant? To Julia, who is the Fund the UC coordinator for the EVPSA office.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your question, Madison. So the strategy that's been come up with by the Fund the UC campaign and also our partners across institution and different schools as well in the UC system is to have a 25% increase for the Pell Grant over the next 4 years. So that would be aiming to fully double the Pell by the fiscal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julia. And then as for how you can get involved, at the end of this presentation, we're going to drop links for the social media of the Fund the UC campaign, which will be continuously posting about how you can get involved and what you can do to support. And like Saúl said, we do really, really need student support. So please, follow that social media page and then keep on top of that. And then we'll also send the email address for the EVPSA office. If you guys have any questions, follow-up questions, you can send direct those there. But for now, I'm going to ask one final question to our panelists. So directed to all the panelists, what strides do you think doubling the Pell Grant would make for UCSB in terms of an institution of socioeconomic mobility? So how do you think that could help our students in terms of socioeconomic mobility? I know that's similar to what we've been asking this whole time, but if you want to make any like closing summary remarks, that's totally fine too.
Do our two students want to start?
Sure. I think that, actually, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sorry, I think I said it kind of weird. So in terms of doubling the Pell Grant, what do you think that would do for UCSB and for the students of UCSB in terms of socioeconomic mobility?
Okay, thank you. So like Saúl said earlier in his presentation, marginalized and low-income students experience higher dropout rates than their non-marginalized or higher class counterparts. And so I think that by doubling the Pell Grant, we could meet that gap in a way that would help to, I guess, increase access for more students to actually achieving a bachelor's degree. Because retention rates are just as important here when we're talking about like socioeconomic mobility and equity. So I think just increasing the access and increasing the ability and navigability of campus to all students is extremely important when talking about financial aid.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that doubling the Pell Grant will open low-income students to a lot of the experiences that college offers. Because I know there's like snowboarding teams. They go out to the mountains on the weekend, and I wanted to join, but then they were like, yeah, it's $600 to join. Or like you're looking at like a fraternity or something, right? You want to join them, and then it's like, oh, it's $2,000 to join them, or there's just like. I guess it just goes back to all that accessibility, just random things that pop up. Yeah, the Pell Grant would help eliminate that.
I'll chime in real quick and then let Saúl wrap it up. But I totally agree with Gabriel and Uche. I think those are great points. I think also addressing time to degree for low income students. I think that's one of the best ways for students to reduce the cost of higher education is to graduate either early or on time. And so I think that doubling the Pell would definitely level the playing field there. And then to build on what Gabriel said a little bit, one of the things that is really difficult for me in my role is to see students that want to do something like an unpaid internship over the summer, but they're not able to do that, to participate in an unpaid internship because they have to work over the summer to be able to afford to continue to be at UCSB or any of the other UC campuses or a CSU. So I think that doubling the Pell would really do wonders for our low income students, and it would level the playing field, which I think is not only desirable, but in my opinion, it's absolutely the right thing to do.
If I could just add a little bit to that, but it would also allow for things like when safe and hopefully soon we're able to studying abroad, those other experiences that are important. But if I can share a little bit about what it means in terms of social mobility, within 5 years of graduating, the median individual income for Pell Grant students exceeds their families when they entered the UC. So in a very short time frame for our Pell Grant recipients, after they graduate, their income levels are already exceeding what their family income levels were at the moment that they entered. And more than 1 in 3 UC alumni who come or enter the institution at the bottom 20% of income earners, they raise to the top 20% of income earners as adults. So, you know, there's a very real impact, you know, to having this resource, ultimately graduating and earning that degree, you know, but for our low income students, that gap is closing a lot sooner by being able to attend and graduate.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys for being on this panel.